Good evening, I'm David Brown, and welcome to the Northern Sun Experience. With less than a month to go before the NSIC tournament, the competition is heating up in both men's and women's basketball. Here are some of the biggest stories from this past weekend, and let's start with a record-setting performance at Minnesota Crookston. The Golden Eagles team record may not be great, but their freshman sensation Harrison Cleary was shining on Friday night. Cleary poured in a school record 42 points in a close loss to Minnesota State. The 42 is the highest individual scoring game in the NSIC this season and the highest overall in the last 3 years. Ironically enough, as I mentioned, Crookston lost Cleary's 42-point game, but came back to win the following night against Concordia St. Paul. Nevertheless, once the conference tournament starts, keep an eye out for Cleary, the conference's second leading scorer, averaging nearly 21.5 points per game. Big game from him could propel the Golden Eagles at any point. From a team perspective, the conference-leading MSU Moorhead men and women each had a mixed bag of results this weekend. The Dragon women got a win Friday night at Southwest Minnesota State before falling in a tight contest to Sioux Falls on Saturday. With a 14-2 conference record, the Dragons still remain 3 games ahead of second-place Northern State in the North Division. Meanwhile, the men had a tough loss in overtime at SMSU Friday, but bounced back with a dominant 25-point win at Sioux Falls on Saturday. MSU Moorhead's lead in the North Division has dwindled, however, to just 1 game over Northern State. And speaking of the Wolves, the men and women both swept their road trips this weekend, where their Dragon counterparts only went 1-1. The women got a close win at Sioux Falls Friday and a big win at SMSU Saturday. Meanwhile, the men got a last-second three-pointer from Mac Arvidsson to beat the Cougars Friday night, while getting a double-digit victory at the Mustangs on Saturday night. At the time, SMSU was tied for the lead in the South Division, so Northern State definitely making some waves as we begin the month of February. And when we come back, Jordan Dalton will join me to break it all down, including how the Wolves were able to pull off the difficult road trip sweep.
The Northern Sun Experience on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and Dakota Land Honda.
And welcome back to the Northern Sun Experience, joined once again by former Augustana point guard Jordan Dalton to break down all things NSIC hoops. Jordan, we're going to start on the men's side, and the best weekend easily belonged to Northern State. 2 tough road wins against Sioux Falls and Southwest Minnesota State. How dangerous are the Wolves right now?
Well, I think they're a very dangerous team, especially on the offensive end. You know, they've been able to put the ball in the basket about as consistently as anybody in the conference this season. You know, they're on a 4-game winning streak right now, and they've scored over 80 points in 3 of those 4 wins. And so they're just a team that really does a great job of getting great shots on a consistent basis. You know, if you look at both games this weekend, they shot over 50% from the field in both of their games this weekend, And so that's really tough to compete with on a consistent basis. Not only do they shoot 50% from the field, they shot over 50% from the 3-point line too. And so that's just a great weapon where it really spaces the floor out. We talk about it all the time, where teams don't really know what to do because you have so many weapons out there on the 3-point line that can knock down shots consistently. And so I think when you look at such an offensively talented team, they put a lot of pressure on teams every night that you have to make buckets to win games against the Northern State Wolves. And they've consistently proved that they can score against anybody in the conference. And so if your offense isn't working efficiently, you're going to have a hard time beating them, which is why obviously they've been so great. You look at the start of the game, you know, with that 3-point ability, they're able to score in bunches, you know, so they can take a 2-point game, stretch it out to 12 or 14 in a matter of a minute and a half or 2 minutes, you know. Against, you know, Southwest Minnesota State, they came out on a 19-1 run and just never looked back. And so they have an ability to really stretch the game out in a short period of time, and obviously has them really rolling right now.
You mentioned the 3-point shooting. A lot of that has to be helped by the inside-outside presence. They got Logan Doyle, the transfer from South Dakota State. He's been a presence inside and has allowed shooters like you said to hit down threes, like Mac Arvidsson, who had the game-winning one against USF. Well, Upper Iowa got 2 home wins over the North Dakota teams to run the conference's longest winning streak to 5. Not to disparage UMary or Minot State, but record-wise, these were games the Peacocks were supposed to win. So what does that say to you, Jordan, when a team like Upper Iowa simply takes care of business?
Well, if you look at a team like the Peacocks, it just shows a tremendous amount of maturity in my book, because these were 2 games that coaches always call trap games, right? Easy opponents to overlook just because of their records. And then if you look at their upcoming weekend, they play against Northern State and then Minnesota State Moorhead. And so 2 huge games this upcoming weekend. So the Peacocks could have easily overlooked University-Mankato and Minot State, but they didn't. They came in and they took care of business. And what I really liked, which was most impressive to me, was how they finished the games. both of those first halves were tough battles. You know, the Peacocks weren't playing their best games in those first halves. Both first halves, they were able to come out and score 52 and 50 points respectively. And so that just shows you the ability to close out games. Things aren't necessarily going your way. And they showed a great job to lock in on the offensive end, especially really come out and execute. And like you said, just get wins they're supposed to. When you're supposed to win the game, you want to come out, take care of business, and be able to move on. I thought they did a great job of that.
And with Southwest Minnesota State's loss, Upper Iowa now in sole possession of first place in the South Division at 13-3. But as you said, they got an extremely tough weekend coming up. They're at Northern State and at MSU Moorhead. And speaking of the Dragons, a mixed bag for MSUM this weekend. A tough loss in overtime at Southwest Minnesota State, but then they come back with a blowout 25-point win, 84-59 at Sioux Falls. So how impressed were you with the Dragons' bounce back after a tough, long overtime game?
Yeah, it was great to see them bounce back and get a win, obviously, but it's tough for the Dragons when they don't get stops consistently on the defensive end. You know, they are the best offensive team in the conference, and so scoring hasn't really been a problem for them. But when they give up 113 points in a game, granted it was an overtime game, but even if you look at regulation, they still gave up 91 points in regulation. You're just not going to win games consistently by giving up that many points. And so for the Dragons, we talk about how dynamic that four-guard offense is on the offensive end. Sometimes it creates some disadvantages on the defensive end. You have Ayub and Doss, who are extremely long, athletic defenders, versatile defenders that can guard multiple positions. But all five guys have to be locked in on the defensive end to be able to get stops consistently, especially down the stretch. And so they want to be at a championship level. They've played at a championship caliber nearly all season. They're just going to have to be able to get stops more consistently on the defensive end. And that's what they did, obviously, bouncing back Saturday, limiting Sioux Falls to just 59 points in the entire game, held them to only 22 in the first half. So they were really locked in and zoned in and focused on the defensive end. And that's the side of the court that they really have to pay attention to if they're going to go far in the conference tournament.
Minnesota State Moorhead still in first place in the North Division, but they've got 4 in a row at home coming up over the next 2 weekends. Well, Minnesota-Mankato has maybe been a bit under the radar this year. They won both games on the road this weekend, but after being predicted to finish #1 in the conference, Jordan, the Mavericks are currently 7th based on record. So why do you believe MSU has been so up and down, and can they make a run here late?
Yeah, I definitely think they can make a run. We talked about it. They're a team that utilizes transfers quite a bit, and so they have 5 transfers on this team. And so what's tough is individually, they're all extremely, extremely talented, but it takes time to build chemistry. It takes time to build trust and familiarity with one another. And I think right now they're just struggling a little bit there. But like I said, they have great individual talent. Look at a guy like John Fuqua, he's a matchup nightmare. So they've only lost 2 games to teams below 500 record. Like I said, I think they have the talent to make a push. Hopefully they can kind of get it together and kind of build a little bit of cohesion as they're moving forward toward the end of the season.
Minnesota State Mankato, definitely a team to look out for, but they got 6 games left. All but one of them are going to be against teams above 500, so it will certainly be a test for the Mavericks down the stretch. Well, when we come back, Jordan will break down the weekend that was in NSIC women's hoops. And welcome back to the Northern Sun Experience. Once again, joined by Jordan Dalton. We're going to talk NSIC women's hoops now. And Jordan, we have to start with Concordia St. Paul. 2 more wins on the road this weekend. That makes 8 wins in a row for the Golden Bears. So who in particular performed well for CSP this weekend? Yeah,
well, obviously you look at the division player of the week, and Caitlin Russell. She was an absolute monster down low in the painted area. She did a great job, obviously averaging 22 points and 8.5 rebounds this past weekend. And she was just a great post presence. And one part of her game that I really like is the fact that she can get to the free throw line and knock down free throws consistently. To me, that's a very underrated aspect, especially in a post player's game. When you're playing in the post, teams obviously want to be really physical with you, right? Want to make it tough for you to catch the basketball. But when you're shooting 80% from the free throw line, in the defender's mind, they're thinking maybe I can't play as physical because I don't want to send her to the free throw line. And so I think that's an aspect of her game that she really utilizes, and I think it really plays into the mental aspect of people when they're defending her as well. And then you look at Anna Schmidt, she's been killing it all season long. She's averaging 18 points, which is 3rd best in the conference. And she's another player that is a very tough, physical player that makes a living in the painted area. She shot over 100 free throws this season. Again, so when she's getting into the lane, she's searching out and seeking out contact. And not only is she getting that contact and getting to the free throw line, but she's converting at a high rate. And again, you're getting easy buckets. You're getting buckets when the clock is stopped. And that really eliminates a lot of pressure on the offensive end to execute so efficiently. So I just think their physical play and their ability to get to the free throw line has really been what's are what catapulted them into such a great second half of the season.
The record right now in the conference is 11-5. This is after starting 3-5, and they got 4 of their last 6 games in the conference season at home. Well, Northern State has won 4 games in a row now. Close win at Sioux Falls on Friday, then SMSU Saturday. We know the Wolves as a defensive team, but their offense recently has been spectacular. For a team that likes to play in the 60s, as you and I have talked about in the past, they've scored more than 70 in 6 of their last 7 games. So why is the Wolves' offense working?
Well, obviously, you got back-to-back North Division Player of the Week, and Miranda Ristow, just playing great. And she's, to me, a microcosm of their entire basketball team, right? Just a player who really understands her strengths. You look at her this this season, averaging 16 points and 8 boards, and she's shooting over 53% from the field. So what that tells you is that's a player who really understands her strengths. She understands her game, and she gets the shots that she wants to take on a consistent basis. And that's the entire Northern State team. We talked about it. They're not a great outside shooting team, and they understand that weakness. And so they've actually shot 115 less three-pointers than their opponents this season. They don't let teams speed them up as far as tempo goes. They execute their offensive end, and they understand their biggest strength is in that painted area. And so as a team, they do a great job of just living in that painted area. They don't take the first shot they see. They work the basketball around to get a great shot, and they understand who has what strengths and really play to those strengths. And so I think they're going to be a very, very tough outcome conference tournament time because they understand who they are, what their strengths are, and play to those strengths on a consistent basis.
Northern State, like Concordia St. Paul, 11-5, only this time in the North Division. Meanwhile, they're 3 games still behind Minnesota State Moorhead. They had a 15-game winning streak, the Dragons did, but now they've lost 2 of their last 4 games. Not really a reason to panic. As I said, they're still up by 3 games in the conference standings. But what did you take from the fact that they lost to Sioux Falls on Saturday, and what can the Dragons do down the stretch to maybe alleviate some of the errors they've had recently?
Yeah, we've talked about Drew Sand as being one of, if not the best offensive player in the conference. But I think teams have really honed in on her, and she's really drawing a lot of defensive attention. Obviously, in that loss, she had another tough night where she went 4 for 12 from the field. And I think all the pressure she's getting is when she gets a shot, she really wants to take it, right? So she's not being patient on the offensive end. And her teammates are going to have to step up and knock down some open shots because obviously if she's attracting so much defensive attention, she can be a decoy to get others open shots. And so I think they just have to do a better job of maybe using her as a decoy in certain situations to free up some other opportunities for teammates on the offensive end. They also have to get back to shooting threes. You know, they're a team that usually makes over 7 three-pointers a game. In that loss, they only hit 4 three-pointers and shot 24% from the three-point line. And so when you don't have that outside threat that you're used to, teams are just going to sag into the paint and make you prove that you can beat them from the outside. And so that clogs the paint up. There's no freedom of movement on the offensive end. It just really makes it for a tough night on the offensive end. Like I said, no need to panic, but it is some things they're going to have to address. And I think as teammates start to knock down shots, Sanders will get a little bit more freedom on the offensive end and knock down some shots of her own.
Yeah, the Dragons will definitely need Cassidy Thorsten and Jackie Volker, girls like that, to step up here down the stretch. Well, Augustana continued their impressive road winning streak. They won at Winona State last weekend. Then they won at Minnesota Duluth on Friday before a pretty dismal shooting performance on Saturday at St. Cloud State. Now, they won 3 of 4 on the road over the past 2 weekends. Was that St. Cloud State game a case of one bad game, or is there sort of an inconsistent Jekyll and Hyde component to the Vikings right now?
Well, I think it was just a bad shooting night. We talked about last week how the Vikings love to shoot three-pointers early and often. Well, they missed their first 18 three-pointers from the field.
That'll do it.
And I thought that just kind of set the tone for the rest of the game. Like you said, they shot 19% from the first half, and they just really didn't get into a flow on the offensive end after that. But once again, I don't think there's any reason to panic, but they do have to find ways to generate offense if they're not hitting their three-pointers. They're a long, athletic team that can really get out, pressure the basketball. I know in the past, Coach McCrouth has really loved to use some full-court pressure to create some transition buckets. So nothing to panic about, but they are going to have to find some alternate ways when that three ball isn't going in.
Augustana at home this weekend against Minnesota Crookston and Bemidji State. Jordan Dalton, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Well, when we come back, our Under the Northern Sun campus alumni feature showcases Minnesota State in Mankato. Welcome back to the Northern Sun Experience. It's time once again to name 2 new members to the NSIC's 25th anniversary team. Congrats to former Wayne State track athlete Sarah Wells, the 2015 indoor and outdoor national champion in the shot put. Wells also holds the conference records in both categories, along with being an 8-time Division II All-American. Congrats are also in order for former Minnesota Duluth basketball star Lindsay Deeds. A two-time All-Conference player, Deeds was the 2003 NSIC Freshman of the Year, as well as the 2003 NSIC Tournament MVP. Deeds recently received her PhD in statistics from the University of Minnesota, writing her dissertation on climate change. She currently works at the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis. And speaking of Minneapolis, our Under the Northern Sun campus alumni feature showcases someone who's emerged in the city as a breakout receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. But before he suited up in the NFL, Adam Thielen made a name for himself at Minnesota State in Mankato.
I was actually told by a few places that I shouldn't play Division II football, just go play basketball somewhere or play D3, because they just didn't think I was going to play Division II football, prove people wrong. Just taking it one day at a time and making sure that I'm doing the same things that kind of got me here, and working hard and making plays. It doesn't matter where you came from, as long as you're the best football player at that position, you're going to play, and they trust you to go out there and do your job. So after the Super Regional Combine, I actually had a few scouts pull me to the side and talk to me, and that was right after I ran the 40, so I hadn't even caught a ball yet. One day at a time, that's one thing that I preach is just taking it one day at a time and making sure that every single day that you're getting better at what you want to get better at and what you need to get better at. I never said, I'm going to make it to the NFL. I just said, hey, I'm going to go work my butt off, and I had it in the back of my head that, I want to play in the NFL someday. Coming here, feeling comfortable, knowing everything, knowing where things are, where good places to eat are, just things around town. It's a time to see old coaches, old friends, people from around the community that I've gotten to know over the years. It's just a great time to do that. Try to get to my favorite spots, here and there. Try to get over to Wagy's for breakfast and Jake's for some pizza. Get to the places that my wife and I enjoyed going when we were in college. It's pretty cool too that we both graduated from here, and then we already have some MAV gear for the little guy, so excited for this step of our life, and we can't wait for him to get here. I know my wife is thrilled to have a baby boy, and we can hopefully teach him some of the things that we've done in our lives and in sports, and just teach him how to be a good person. Pretty blessed to be in this position. Sometimes it's not even what you do, it's just be in the right spot at the right time, and just getting an opportunity and making the most of it. We talk about a lot, talk about games we played against each other, a little smack talk going on. But yeah, it's cool to have those guys here. It just shows how good NSIC football can be, and above that, there's even more guys that came from D2. So it just shows the level of football that Division II is, and that you can make it, and you can play at a high level coming from that division. It's competitive football. So when I made the jump from here to going to the Vikings, it wasn't much different for me. The speed of the game was pretty similar. The first thing I did was rookie camp, and so it's all rookies, so it didn't seem much different for me, which is a testament of NSIC and the football and the sports that comes from this level. I got to take it one day at a time, and like I said before, I want to have that mindset that I had when I came in here right away, that I got to come out here and fight and scratch and try to make this football team.
When we come back, it's DB's Picks, my top 5 plays of the past week in the NSIC.
The Northern Sun Experience on Midco Sports Network is presented by Sanford Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and Dakota Land Honda.
And welcome back. It's time for DB's Picks, my top 5 plays of the past week in the NSIC. At number 5, it's a perfect 10 on the Peacock alley-oop. From half court, Carson Parker lobs it up for Jordan Hay, who completes the layup. Parker, normally known for his last-second three-point heroics, launches from half court this time. Sure, it's not a made basket from Parker, but he's definitely on point from deep with this pinpoint pass to Hay at number 5. For number 4, we head to Sioux Falls, where Daniel Hurt leaves Northern State in pain. Off the feed from Zach Wessels, Hurt throws it down with 2 hands. Check it out again. Wessels drives the baseline, lobs it over the head of 2 Wolf defenders to Hurt for the slam at number 4. At number 3, 3 Peacocks combine for a sweet play. Josh Weber to Carson Parker with the feed to Mitch Aime for the flush. It's a blink and you miss it type of deal, but with no hesitation whatsoever. Parker again provides a perfect pass with a quick flip to Aime, who glides in for the high-flying 2 at play number 3. We end our countdown with 2 buzzer beaters. First, Wayne State's Vance Jansen drives the length of the court and hits the game-winning layup as time expires against Minnesota Duluth. With the score knotted at 77 and just 4.3 seconds left, Jansen takes the inbounds and with a full head of steam drives right through the heart of the Bulldog defense and nails the scoop. This game-winning 2 comes in at number 2. But our top play of the week goes to Northern State's Mac Arvidsson. Down by 1 with time running out on the road at Sioux Falls, Arvidsson comes off a screen to nail the game-winning three-pointer from the right wing with 1.8 seconds remaining. Arvidsson hit a three-pointer just before the halftime buzzer of this game as well, so he's had some practice at this whole race in the clock scenario. Unfortunately for the Cougars, but very fortunately for the Wolves, it was the return of the Mac, the name of a 90s classic, perfect for a classic finish, as well as the #1 play of the past week in the NSIC. Once again, a thank you to all of our NSIC member schools for their time, video, and contributions to this week's show. Tune in next week right here for yet another Northern Sun Experience.